Gym leaders, sentinels on the path to victory. They all had to prove their worth to earn that honor. But what if they hadn't stayed there? What if they had been crowned champions? After sleepless nights imagining what those worlds would be like and 80 drawings later, it's time to find out. And this gym story began with Brock. A serious and brave young man with rock-solid discipline and who barely smiles, yet at the same time someone compassionate and with a big heart. But it would be future appearances years later where he is shown much friendlier, relaxed and experienced that would explain his side with greater potential to take him to the top, his passion for Pokémon fossils. And in this remote timeline, millions of years ago, a strange substance fell on Mount Moon. That material would go unnoticed by everyone, including scientists, who would mistake it for just another unremarkable rocky wall. Until one day, Brock, a fossil enthusiast, who happened to be excavating that area, would witness how the prehistoric material finally cracked. And from it emerged an Aerodactyl that got trapped in the collision, frozen in time, intact after that strange extraterrestrial component. It was not about an ordinary Aerodactyl, a species that both science and Brock himself already knew of back then. Not even that mega evolution, which was supposed to recover some of that original power. It was an authentic, perfect one, very different from the versions revived by modern technology. There, Brock would witness the true power of prehistoric Pokémon and understand that today's technology to revive extinct Pokémon is crude, far from approaching the true power of the past. He decided to distance himself from the researchers in Kanto and embark on his own studies about what the Pokémon that inhabited prehistory were really like. There, he would start training his beloved fossils, focusing on methods to recover their lost essence during reanimation, achieving a team of primal and beastly power that even the elite could not contain, securing the champion position. At the top of the world, crossroads between two eras, Brock would challenge us as champion with Kabutops, which would have regained the speed and predatory edge of the ancient seas. His Omastar, trained in geothermal currents, the abyssal super predator that it once was and science could never replicate. His Armaldo, much closer to the armored arthropod that ruled the coasts, while his Cradilli would regain the lost mineral layers, making it an impenetrable wall. Rampardos, the clamor of the wild era, would embody the brute force of a forgotten world. But his ace is different. The Aerodactyl that prompted him to embark on this journey, and, in recognition of the prehistoric power that Brock had achieved on his own merits, would join his team. It's not about an enhanced fossil Pokémon based on special training like the others, nor about its megaform. It's a true Aerodactyl from the prehistoric era, a time when mere survival required colossal strength, and this being ruled the skies. For a region like Kanto, which told us about human advancement and technology over the environment and its consequences, it's quite poetic that someone like Brock, who vindicates the wild power of the past, takes the throne. But if you find this story surprising, wait until you hear about Misty, the distorted mermaid who hides an even more crystalline gem. In this universe, Misty would grow up as just another young girl in the bustling Cerulean city, shy and mysterious, but famous worldwide for her mesmerizing turquoise gaze that transported you to the seaside. She was, however, very lonely, not mingling much with people, and preferring the company of Pokémon, with whom she spent her days playing in the nearby Cerulean Cave, a quiet place inhabited by harmless Pokémon who had already become accustomed to her presence. That's how young Misty grew up alongside Pokémon, developing an unprecedented bond with them from a very young age. But one day, like any other, the atmosphere in the cave changed suddenly. The ambience turned serious and suffocating, causing the weak local Pokémon to flee in terror. Something terrible had entered that place. The monster's eyes met Misty's for just an instant, but it was enough for the young woman to feel the deep hatred it exuded. Misty fled in terror, so much so that she stumbled and fell into the deep lake of the cave. She didn't know how to swim, and all the Pokémon in the lake had fled with the arrival of that beast, so no one could come to her aid. Sinking, she felt like it was the end. But just before losing consciousness, she noticed a small figure approaching, one whose aura was strangely opposite to that of the terrible Pokémon that made her flee, full of innocence and joviality. Misty woke up safe and sound in the city, but after that incident, everything would change forever. The Cerulean Cave was no longer that peaceful place where she went to play. Since then, many dangerous Pokémon had started to proliferate there, as if called by it, which would lead that the site be closed to the public. But the biggest change was Misty herself, who had seen that monster firsthand, as well as the mysterious being that had saved her from drowning. So, she decided to become a trainer and start her adventure, traveling throughout the region in search of that unique creature. With the fire of that goal, she trained tirelessly to be ready for the day she would meet one of the two again, which, combined with the natural instinct she had developed from being raised alongside the Pokémon, made her an unstoppable promise that swept through the gyms and seemed to have no limits. Nearly drowning one day made her the best swimmer in the whole region, with a grace and elegance only comparable to her wild style in combat, attributes that gave her the nickname the Deadly Mermaid, who rose as a champion and challenges you as such, with her team consisting of Starmie, who absolutely had to be there, as her first Pokemon that has been with her since childhood, and a nod to her original team. Golduck is another one of the companions that has been with her since she was a child, but it is not an ordinary one. From its early stage, it showed an immense latent psychic power, one that vaguely resembled the psychic mutant she sought to face and inspired her journey. Golduck is also one of the most formidable swimmers in the Pokemon world, so it could have been the one who taught Misty to become the swimmer she is today. Togekiss, born from an egg given as a gift by a gentleman visiting Kanto, is known for bringing joy to the lives of those with pure hearts whom it encounters. Nidoqueen, one of the Pokemon that Misty had on her stadium team, the overprotective mom of the group who would watch over everyone. Ditto is the most unpredictable member of her team and starred in some of the toughest battles she faced on her journey. The trainer's research on the mysterious Pokemon of Cerulean Cave would lead her to the Pokemon Mansion of Cinnabar Island. There, immersed in reading the diaries that recounted the fateful day, this strange Pokemon interrupted her, and for some reason, something about it reminded Misty of the Pokemon that saved her. Gyarados would close her team, in which she would manage to unlock the Mega Evolution, accessing a beastly power that could perhaps face that latent threat in Kanto. Only the winner of that fatal clash at the top will finally be able to face the monster that has the entire world on edge. Maybe Mew and Mewtwo could have a much bigger role in that hypothetical edition with Misty as the champion, but for now, I hope you caught some of the references in the video, like Golduck, Togekiss, and Gyarados as a tribute to Misty's classic Pokemon in the anime, or Mew saving her by teleporting her to a safe place, in reference to the famous Mew glitch which occurred precisely near Cerulean City and is related to that move. Now, have you heard about the Kanto War? One of the most famous urban legends in the history of the series, which tried to explain a Kanto where the vast majority of the population are children, as many adults lost their lives in the war. Lost records of Pokemon that the protagonist has to recover in their Pokedex, even the fact that many of the gym leaders in their early artworks wore military clothes. Lieutenant Surge himself, the third leader of Kanto, is openly mentioned as a war hero who survived the battlefield thanks to his electric Pokemon. But in the universe where Surge rose as a champion, the Kanto War is not just a theory, it happened, and Kanto lost. Lieutenant Surge was none other than the marshal of the rival army, who after the war would take command of Kanto, becoming an ambiguous figure. Publicly, he would advocate for forgiveness and reconciliation, providing resources for the reconstruction, modernization, and development of Kanto. On the other hand, it was ensured that the local culture was completely displaced, with the Elite Four being spared, but replaced by figures from the winning side. Despite losing the war, Kanto would prosper, but it would do so at the cost of its identity.
Regarding Surge, as expected, he became the new champion,
with a formidable team made up of loyal companions with whom he emerged victorious in 1001 battles. He would start with Pinkerton, and be careful not to underestimate it because of its appearance, as it is the vanguard that would set the battleground for the whole war. It would put spikes, toxic spikes, the electric field with its ability, and, finally, sacrifice itself with Memento. With the field prepared, the terrible Porygon Z would follow. As a hacked Pokemon from the original patent, this one would represent the importance of network warfare and information teams. It's worth clarifying its role, destroying everything with Hyper Beam and Tri-Attack with its adaptability ability, referring to the importance of adapting to the situation if the battle requires it. If you overcome that devastation, there follows Surge's beloved Raichu, his oldest and most loyal companion, who has been with him since he was a private, and they have saved each other's lives on numerous occasions. An inseparable comrade who could communicate with the Marshal without needing mediation. As the general of a distant region, Braviary would give it the nationalist seal that guides this story. In the war, he stood out for his reconnaissance work and his warrior pride, so when someone tries to intimidate him, his strength increases dramatically. Surge's Inteleon was a legendary sniper decorated with honors, while Rotom, with its ability to possess artifacts of all kinds, would represent hacking and espionage, key in the war, and its form would vary according to what is most convenient for the opponent's team. Maybe in a game set in this story, the main character could be a young trainer from Kanto determined to overthrow Surge and plant the seed of revolution. But speaking of seeds, the mysterious Erika quietly leads the bustling Celadon city, and something that has always caught my attention about her is her badge. The Rainbow Badge. While the Western versions played more with names related to each leader's type, in the original Japanese version, all the badges are simply named after the color that represents their respective cities. All except Erika's Rainbow Badge, a multicolored ray that would unite all the sensibilities of the region. Wouldn't it be, by itself, the logical medal for the champion? In the universe of the champion Erika, power has ceased to be monochrome. In addition to being the most talented of trainers, she is a multidisciplinary artist, poet, painter, and dancer. Like most champions, she would not present herself as such at first, but she would have encounters with you throughout the region, acting as a mentor, because she saw something special in you, your determination in overcoming the obstacles on your adventure, and the sparkle in your eyes would inspire their creations, concluding with a final battle that would elevate the fights to the category of art. Her team would consist of Smeargle, who like Surge's Pincurchin would set up the battlefield. It would prepare the canvas on which to paint this masterpiece. With the Focus Sash and Spore, it would ensure putting at least one Pokemon to sleep, setting up Rocks, Sunny Day, and poetically sacrifice itself with Memento so that its ace can go all out. Leafeon would enter before its weakened opponent and take advantage of the sun to destroy everything with its devastating one-turn Solar Blade, its synthesis healing a massive amount of HP, and of course its chlorophyll ability, which would make it dance at a speed not noticeable to the inexperienced eye. If for some reason you also let her add a sword dance, I'll go ahead and buy the Flower Crown. Having her ace be an evolution feels right for some reason. She could almost be considered the ultimate kimono girl. The ghostly Decidueye would launch precise arrow-shaped feathers that would hit the opponent at vital points, while Oricorio would finish sending its rivals to the other world. Both birds would form a truly difficult to break ghostly tandem, also making reference to those theories about Erika originally being the ghost leader of the lost Lavender Town's gym. Slowbro would be Erika's companion during her meditations. Like her, it would be able to observe the world without any thoughts flooding its mind, allowing them to connect in an overwhelming way. In battle, it would be its formidable wall which, in case there are doubts, could mega evolve, devastating opponents as it faces its last Pokemon, its most loyal companion, Tangela. What else? Koga the shinobi master of Kanto, made Fuchsia City his lair. But it's not hard to believe that, if he had wanted to, he could have gone much further. He might have stayed in that humble gym to raise his daughter Janine and train her in the ninja arts as his successor. This idea is reinforced by the fact that when she was ready to become a leader in the second generation and Koga could get serious, he became an Elite Four member in the second generation. The thing is, he was a pioneer in specializing in a style of stall in the first generation, where he barely had tools to shine there. It was he himself who had to create the toxic technique that legends from every corner have exploited so much. What would have happened if, instead of staying in his corner in Kanto, Koga had traveled around the world, learning new and unorthodox techniques to develop and perfect the style he himself created? If that suppressed Koga was Elite Four, there's no doubt that this Koga could face the champion and probably win the title. That's what happened in this universe. In a dimly lit room at the top of the Pokémon League, the King of Ninjas would challenge you with his infamous Crobat, which would initially use toxic spikes, a technique it learned in a distant region. With these, the poisoning would take its toll on all the Pokémon that its opponent sends out. But unlike other leads, this one wouldn't just look to set the stage and sacrifice itself. With U-turn and its incredible speed, it would be ready to leave the battlefield if circumstances demand it. The twist? Like Lance and his dragons, Koga would have a second Crobat, a metaphor that by accepting his challenge, you are entering a sinister cave and the bats welcome you. This one would also have U-turn to pivot at will with the rest of his team, but unlike the previous one, it would be ultra offensive, combining its speed with the choice band, delivering strikes of alarming power. Koga has been specializing in the coughing line for many years. That's why, upon discovering the regional wheezing in Galar, he saw a whole new world of possibilities. Its ability would neutralize any unexpected tricks from opponents trying to resist. Will-O-Wisp would weaken any Pokemon that, for some reason, managed to avoid being poisoned. Pain Split, it would heal and hurt at the same time. And finally, with Explosion, it would take down the opponent if necessary. When Koga discovered Gliscor in one of his travels, he was fascinated and knew it had to be a star on his team. Now, not only could he use the poison to torment his rivals, but also to heal his own Pokemon. Chansey lived in Fuchsia City, but in Kanto, Koga never got too interested in it, seeing its fragility on the physical side. But when he discovered the Eviolite, he saw in that old acquaintance an incredible piece for his opponent's exhaustion scheme. Finally, Kanto never saw the stars, and on his journey, he could see how Eevee could evolve into Umbreon, against which its foes succumb with all the previous wear and tear. Its dark cloak gives it the ninja seal. And let's remember that in its beta design, before the dark type was conceived, Umbreon was going to be poison type, connecting with Koga's origins. Sabrina is a special case. Ignoring the fact that the psychic type was absurd in the first generation, and that her signature Alakazam is the most powerful enemy in the game, not counting Mewtwo, what sets this young woman apart is that she was born with extrasensory powers, said to be on par with the most powerful psychic Pokemon. Sabrina doesn't care much about anything. She doesn't even like battles, which is why she didn't crush the rocket invasion or storm the skies of the Pokémon League. But if something made her change her mind, it's very easy to see her as the ruler of Kanto. In several artworks and dialogues, we see how Sabrina's psychic powers awakened at a very young age, making her a celebrity since childhood. But what if that hadn't been the case? In this timeline, Sabrina would awaken her psychic powers as a child, just like always, but instead of being admired and becoming a star, she would be seen as something demonic, aberrant, and dangerous. She would grow up alone and isolated until a kind-hearted soul took pity on her. None other than the gym leader of Saffron, the king of karate, who would take her in as a disciple. The young Sabrina would be trained as a martial artist like any other. Her master would notice that the mental instability caused her great suffering, but together, over time, they would manage to control it, creating an unbreakable bond. Everything was going well until Team Rocket invaded Silphco, and the brave gym leader went alone, without informing his disciples, to try to quell it. A deadly mission where the king of karate would lose his life, which caused Sabrina, upon finding out, to suddenly lose control, awakening her psychic powers in a monstrous way, and in a single night, destroying Team Rocket. Something changed in her forever. She saw firsthand the corruption of the Elite Four that had done nothing to stop the invasion, and, with no trace of humanity in her eyes, she attacked the Pokémon League. Lorelei was crushed. Bruno slaughtered. Not even Agatha, the ghostly subjugator, who already had a lot of experience in the paranormal world, could do anything to stop her. After defeating the champions, Sabrina took the position, determined to, with the help of psychic Pokemon, control the minds of the entire population, turning Kanto into her personal dollhouse, where no one would have the chance to hurt her again. The protagonist of such a tragic story would have to be someone exceptional, who was also born with a psychic power comparable to Sabrina's own, and somehow escaped her mental control to challenge her into reasoning and bringing humanity back to Kanto. In that fateful encounter, Sabrina would accept the challenge with Alakazam! No further explanations are needed. It remains, excluding the legendaries, the most powerful psychic Pokemon in the region where psychics ruled. If you survived that, more or less intact, the real scheme of Sabrina would begin. Claydol is, in my opinion, one of the most visually uncanny Pokemon, so it would fit very well in such an ominous story. This one would have Rapid Spin to get rid of entry hazards, if you thought of trying to take advantage of that, as if Sabrina herself, with her clairvoyance, had read your intentions long ago when she started assembling her team. But its real role is to resist and set up the dual screens to pave the way for her most feared Pokemon, Espeon. One more defensive than usual, and with the help of the screens, it would start using Calm Mind like crazy. This, combined with Morning Sun, would comfortably feed, not its stats, but also his terrifying stored power, which would wipe out everything once sufficiently charged. But if for any reason you survive and manage to leave it with little HP, the nightmare doesn't end, because with Baton Pass would leave the battle and transfer those boosted stats to a completely healthy Pokemon. Musharna, an even more defensive and hard to knock down Pokemon, which would inherit those boosts, would also have stored power and could equally heal with Moonlight, the psychic dance of the moon and the sun, a living nightmare from which this demon feeds with delight. Finally, for the few chosen ones who reach this point, the most sinister surprise would await them. Latios and Latias, two innocent Pokemon who are lured by people with a dreamy spirit. But Sabrina would have acquired such power that she would be capable of emitting mental waves that simulated those emotions, forcing them to be the two beautiful pieces that close his macabre chest. I may have gone a bit overboard with this one, but you understand me. It's the most ominous and brutal story we've had in the video so far, so for me it had to have a disproportionately difficult battle. For now, I think it's worth saving Giovanni for a future video with the same idea, but with the villains. So we only have Blaine left. Another one of those who, believe it or not, it's not at all crazy to imagine him as a champion. It seems like they wanted all these leaders to hide, in one way or another, a monstrous potential. As the original owner of the secret key he used to seclude himself in his gym, not to mention his close friendship with Mr. Fuji during his years as a scientist, it would practically confirm that Blaine was one of the scientists involved in the creation of Mewtwo at the Pokemon Mansion. Maybe that's why he locked himself up, hiding for fear that he would come in search of revenge. But in this story, Mewtwo's awakening would be even more catastrophic. The existential void it would feel upon gaining awareness with all the power and intelligence in the world, but without a purpose, would be so overwhelming that destroying the laboratory would not be enough. It would rise to the skies, with eyes filled with only fear and hate, and using his psychic powers, it would cause the Cinnabar volcano to erupt, leaving no survivors. Or actually, there would only be one survivor, Blaine, who would have left Cinnabar Island during an investigation and upon returning would see the devastated landscape, absolute desolation, and the death of all his colleagues. He would instantly understand what happened and, immersed in infinite guilt, decide to stop Mewtwo, capture him again, to save the world from the monster he helped create. Driven by that determination, this Blaine would use all his knowledge and contacts in the scientific community to assemble the most powerful team. He would become a champion, but he knew that it was far from enough to stop the threat he had created. So he reached out to an old friend, Professor Oak, to find a young prodigy who could surpass him. And, years later, upon hearing the news that a promising challenger, a young man who might have a chance against Mewtwo had appeared, he decides to test him as a champion, with a team including Torkoal, the controlled volcano that would, like any good fire team, set up the sun at first, turning its eruption into a delirium of power that would make him never forget the eruption of Cinnabar Volcano and its purpose. Magmortar, which was discovered by researching how to push the potential of his Pokémon further without corrupting their nature like what happened with Mewtwo, but rather enhancing their natural virtues. He developed the first prototype of a Magmatizer that would unlock this new form that many trainers around the world would use, because after all, Blaine's spirit is still that of an inventor. In that same line would go Rotom, which possessed one of his gadgets while he was working, and taking advantage of his scientific genius, would come to this very new form. Volcarona, the myth that replaced the sun, would be a symbol of rebirth and hope, and with its quiver dance, a formidable enemy capable of devouring entire teams. But Blaine never stopped thinking about Mewtwo, and, in case everything failed, he thought of a plan B, some kind of force of nature that could rival with the legendary and, in addition, have some kind of advantage against the beast, which led him to Tyranitar, one of the most feared pseudo-legendary creatures in the world, capable of pulverizing mountains with a single attack, with a godlike strength, and which, conveniently, was a dark type, giving him an advantage against the mutant. He didn't trust that he could defeat Mewtwo, but it was the closest thing he could hold on to. He would close the team with his ace, Arcanine, the Will of Fire, no longer thinking about his past mistakes and his desire to amend them, just the partner with whom he enjoyed the most. Because amidst all that darkness and guilt, the flame of a trainer who loves fighting above all still shines. And this has been the first video of this new beginning where, as I said in my old channel, I want to fall in love again with my content through art, stories, and sharing what Pokemon means to me. If you hype the video and give it a like to start this new era on the best possible foot, it would mean a lot. See you very soon in new adventures of the Pokemon world that we fell in love with.